Oh, this is for a budget?
Yeah, it feels very.
Where's that? Okay.
Would you like me to leave?
Really? I mean, I don't see what we're paying you to be here. I don't know why.
Nope, not,
No.
Budget one, I'm not.
Pat's usually here.
No, we don't usually have an attorney.
No, he's here because he's here, not because he's.
Pat's usually at City
Oh.
Hall
Yeah,
on the day of the council meeting.
but I can assure you, as Madam, and as well as Madam City Manager, the bills will not reflect my attendance.
Yeah, we hang out. You
At the-
can charge
at the-
me for some
at the-
fun.
at the-
I don't
at the
think.
subcommittee.
Okay. I'm gonna get a chair that's a little higher.
Well, hey, just so you know, your chair is really the third one over, so don't be rude.
So don't steal my good, a good one.
Yeah, you move the good chair over here for Pat, and then afterwards, when you move or whatever, you're gonna.
So I'm over there.
Yeah.
Okay. So good Pat, so I'm gonna look tall. So that works.
I saw your wife driving around in a pickup truck. What happened?
Today?
It was yesterday.
She probably didn't fill her car with gas.
All right,
We're live.
Oh, we're live.
Okay, all right. Am I doing this? Okay. Well, it's after 6, so we're gonna start the regular scheduled budget committee, I guess. Go ahead.
Councilmember Black, we're taking public comment.
Any public comment? There's none. So let's move on to item 2, items for discussion. Too late.
Okay. And presenting the item is our Finance Director, Robert Samario.
Good evening, committee members. So this, I guess this is officially the kickoff of the budget for next year. As council directed last time, we are meeting with the committee to go over the budget and to kind of come up with some ideas for how we might balance the budget for next year. So I just want to just real quick, this is kind of tells the whole story, then we'll get into some of the details and then turn it back over to you for the actual, meat of the discussion. But I wanted to remind you that we are on a preliminary basis facing a $406,000 projected deficit. That's an ongoing deficit, so we stripped out all the one-time costs and one-time revenues, and that's kind of what we're left with. We have looked at the numbers that, sort of, okay, what do we think we're going to do this year in terms of revenues? What does that mean in terms of the following year with some normal growth? And we came up with another $91,000 in revenues. And by the way, we're going to get into a lot more detail as part of the mid-year report with the regular council meeting, so I won't get into too much of the details there. And then staff has identified some proposed cuts to the general fund departments and line items totaling $177,973. Unfortunately, we've also identified some recommended structural fixes, and again, we'll go through all this, that adds about $213,000 to the budget. We recommend adjusting the budget accordingly. So on a net basis, we are still looking at an ongoing deficit of about $350,000 after all of those adjustments. So this was something you remember seeing before. This is kind of how we arrived at the $406,000. So the first column numbers, that's the adopted budget this year, where we had really a total budgeted use of reserves of almost $700,000. But if you strip out the one-time stuff, we really adopted a budget that called for, that had an ongoing deficit of $372,000
Say this year, you mean 21 or 22, 23?
this year.
Which ends in June of 23.
Correct. And then we talked about the carryovers and budget amendments thus far through December 31st. There's only one that is ongoing. That's the amendment to the contract with the Conservancy for fuel management work. So really, when we look at the amended budget on an ongoing basis, we're looking at about a $406,000. That's how I got to that number I showed you before. I did want to point out that the ongoing cost of $2.9 million, we will, as again, these are budget numbers. We're likely going to see some savings at the end of the year. Vanessa leaving is going to generate some savings, and we'll see savings in other areas. Some areas we're going to be overspent at a line item level, but on the whole, I expect that we're going to end the year under budget to some extent. But for planning purposes and for budgeting purposes, you always want a budget based on a full complement of staff and what you really think is those costs will be. So it's a good number to go with. And if we talked about in the past, prior years where we've had some, additions to the reserves, or the reserves use was not as high as we thought. That's really in the area of capital and other one-time stuff that was not spent. So when we're talking about ongoing operations and what we budget for that, I wouldn't anticipate large savings there. You know, you're going to see the ebbs and flows, but I wouldn't assume you're going to be looking at, you know, a few $100,000 necessarily of savings there. So it's a good number to use, is my point. We will likely see savings on the one-time stuff, but not on the ongoing stuff that's going to be material. So here are the proposed cuts, and I'm going to go through each of them. They're all pretty straightforward. You'll see that for the most part, we're just looking at adjusting the budget to what we've seen in recent trends. And I'm not sure this has been done before, but looking at the last couple of years or 3 years, how we're doing so far, what do we really think we need for some of these line items? And we adjusted some of those in that regard. But we've also proposed in the city administrator's operating budget, so this is everything excluding staffing, which we'll get to in a moment, $252,000 is the ongoing budget. We're proposing a 5% across-the-board reduction, and it'll be up to the staff, city administrator's office, to determine where those cuts might be. But keep in mind that includes legal costs, city council expenses, and things like that. But the commitment would be to reduce that by 5% across the board, and coming up with $12,600 in cuts or savings. In the planning area, you see the operating budget is only $62,000 because we've called out some other parts of the budget elsewhere. So, but in terms of what was sort of left with on the true operating stuff, we're looking at 5% across the board reduction there of only $3,000. In the emergency preparedness, proposing to eliminate areas 1 and 2 maintenance. I'm not sure if I'm sure you saw in the memo recently from the city manager about potentially having the Conservancy purchase a mower that would avoid having to spend money to maintain those 2 areas, and that would save roughly $32,000, almost $33,000. Repairs and maintenance, we've been budgeting for the ongoing stuff about $35,000 per year. We think $10,000 is all you really need. It's really primarily includes janitorial services, and we are paying currently about $16,000 a year. We think we can reduce that based on now we're past COVID, and we can maybe reduce the number of times they come and clean the offices. Utilities, real estate utilities, property development, legal, and the next few or couple are really to adjust it to what we've seen in the last couple of years and what we're seeing this year of what we need. IT services, that's for all the internet-based cloud support services. We pay somewhere around $54,000, but we think we can save some money, about $2,500, by eliminating unneeded accounts, stale accounts, and reducing costs that way. The next 2 are, again, reducing it to what we've seen in recent trends or recent years. Stormwater management, as you know, Measure W picks up a large portion of those costs, and we've been able to identify more of those costs that we can attribute to Measure W. In fact, this year we just shifted $20,000 in emergency services or emergency preparedness costs paid to the Conservancy to the Measure W, and that was considered an allowable cost. So we think that $75,000 for that line item is an appropriate number to budget. And then code enforcement, as you know, last council meeting, council approved a new contract for code enforcement services with Four Leaf, I think is what they're called. Reduced the contract, so we're going to see savings there relative to the budget. But we also wanted to include some money in there for traffic engineering services that are currently not budgeted anywhere, so we want to make sure we account for that. But we're still able to reduce that by $20,000. So all told, the proposed cuts will be almost $178,000, as I said at the very beginning. The structural fixes are in 2 areas. One, the contracted building services, and we've talked about the fact that revenues are really going up on this area, building permit and other related fees, but so are the costs. And so we expect to pay the county and Wilden for those services this year about $350,000 versus the budget. Again, we're still netting to the positive because we're getting a lot more in revenues. But we need to adjust the fee side of that for those services that are provided by the county and by Wildan. And then the refuse subsidy, we talked about this last time. We had in the past been budgeting and recording construction and demolition deposits as revenues in that fund, which are really a liability because they're refundable. So we had to adjust for that. And then for some reason in 22, we did not see the revenues that we had seen in the prior year from the assessments that we make to our residents. They went down fairly substantially in the $80,000 range, and I can't explain that. I wasn't here when the direct assessment was created for '22. I was involved for this current year, but it went down substantially from what you would normally think, you know. But I think this year we're doing a little bit better, but we're still expecting that we're going to need to up that sort of budgeted subsidy if we're going to keep things constant by $63,000 to keep that whole. Again, last year we transferred $250,000 relative to $168,000 in budget. I don't think we're going to need that much this year, but it's something we're going to pay attention to. But I think $63,000 is a good number for now. So here's again how it kind of shakes out. We, on a preliminary basis for next year, we think our ongoing expenditures are about $2.95 million. Our ongoing revenues 2.6, so we're still left with an ongoing deficit of about 350. And that's really where we turn it over to you, and we provided you some information in the packet, largely to kind of the big categories of things that you can look at. But one of the attachments has these 2-in-1 schedule, which is kind of the basis for the discussion.
So without having specifics, it's hard to know where to cut. And as I spoke to Elaine today, there's nothing really specific here. 5% across the board, I don't know where we're going to find that. These adjust to recent trends, that's just the actual number. It's not actually cutting anything, correct?
Well, it's reducing the budget, so it does have an effect.
Cutting anything.
In terms of actual costs,
Right.
no, but
Right.
you're developing a budget, and you want to make sure you're balancing it, so.
But it's not actually cutting anything. But it does, it makes your
It's
budget.
just making it accurate.
Right.
Yes.
So we understand that. So that's easy to get rid of, and all of that is easy to get rid of. Eliminate areas 1 and 2 of maintenance for the Conservancy. I wasn't 100% sure they are gonna pick that up. Are they gonna pick that up, do you think? Conservancy?
I think the
Or
last
not
we
the-
talked was last week. Looks like all is in place to do that.
Okay, so that's
So-
easy to do.
Well, and I think you take the stance of, we're gonna cut 1 and 2, and then if there's a train wreck out there, then we can talk about it again.
Well, I want to be very specific
Right.
what that means
Tell them,
about,
Let's see what they do.
I want to be specific about what that means, area 1 and 2. So we're like in year 4 of maintaining area 1. And is the seed bank completely gone? No. Is it diminishing? Yes. So it'd be leveraging our capital improvement to keep going. What the Conservancy said was, area 1 was chosen because it was easy to get to,
Right.
right? So they thought that they can buy a mower internally and actually mow area 1 and 2.
Themselves, right.
Right. They don't have the money to buy the mower. And so I suggested, well, why don't the city look into contributing to the mower instead of continuing with area 1 and 2? And last week, I had a meeting with Jennifer Lamarque from Supervisor Hahn's office, who did not fully commit, but said that she could help us find funds to purchase a mower for the Conservancy. And the Conservancy had a meeting with Lamarque on Wednesday, after my Monday meeting. So I'm caught up with them, but it looks like everyone's in this idea of purchasing a mower, eliminating us, contributing funds. So I want to be really clear about that.
Because that was one thing I don't want to get rid of if no one else is going to pick it up.
Yeah, sure, no, I understand,
But it sounds like it's pretty likely they will. That's
Yeah, because
good.
we're totally pot committed. We've already spent whatever that is, 400 grand doing it. We
But
need
it-
to finish it off.
And it's well worth it.
Yeah.
That's a great insurance policy. That's money well
Yes,
spent.
but I think by saying we're not gonna do it, it's gonna put some pressure on them to be creatively solving the problem.
But if they don't, we'll have to
We'll
pick it up.
do
All
it.
right, so that's all pretty easy. Where the 5% come from, we're gonna have to look pretty specifically.
Well, I can tell you now where the 5% is coming from. It's office supplies, it's conferences, it's training budget, it's paper, it's, you know, anything that's actually running in an office.
Well,
That's
some
a
can and some can't be cut.
5% across the board. And I think that's what Councilmember Piper has told us was, hey, look into areas in which you can
Yeah.
take a percentage off.
Okay.
And so that's what we did for this high-level
And
conversation.
all it's really gonna be, deep down underneath it, it's gonna be 1 or 2 less blue newsletters, you know, it's just gonna be 1 or 2 less whatevers.
Okay. All right, so, I'm just trying to figure out what's easy and what's hard. So far, a lot of it's not that hard. So then, you were talking about reducing, traffic engineering and contracting on code enforcement? Is that just we got a reduced, price, but that's not really traffic engineering, is it?
So there are two things there. We reduced that line item and we will likely create a new line item for traffic engineering, but we wanted to preserve some money from that savings in the contract for traffic engineering costs that are currently not budgeted. And we incur somewhere around $6,000, $7,000 a year for a traffic engineer to come out to meetings and the like. And so we want to provide for that. So rather than reduce that budget by the full amount relative to the contract that was just approved, we wanted to save some of that money and move it into our traffic engineering line item for those costs that we are incurring. So the net of that is going to save $20,000.
And then again, we get back to the trash. And I gotta admit, when I read the thing, I didn't really understand how we're having problems. It's kind of a set contract, there's a set price. Why was there an error or a discrepancy?
Yeah.
And why are we not getting the income from the residents? That doesn't make sense. It's
Yeah.
a set cost. It should be a number that we can, it's
Yeah.
a set number.
Yeah, so I could tell you what I did this year. I don't know what was done in the prior year.
Huh?
But the year before that, revenues were, again, much higher than what they were last year, 22. And I can't explain why it went down. You know, what you essentially do is you look at all the parcels that are inhabited and services are being provided, and you get them all, and you just say, okay, here are all the parcels, you verify them, and you send that to the county, and you tell them to charge each of those parcels $1,100, you know, for the year, and that's what you collect. And you sort of say, okay, it's 600 and some properties, and so I know what we're going to be getting this year. It's not going to be as high as it was in the 2 years ago, but it's going to be higher than 22. That's my expectation. So I can't speak for 22 or 21.
22,
I
you
can't-
can't speak for 22.
But I can speak for this current year, and it looks like it's going to certainly be higher than last year.
Higher than 21, 22.
Yes, yes.
I just don't understand why there's a.
Yeah, I don't know what happened.
Be an
The
issue.
amount on my, and I've never looked, so the amount on my property tax bill for the trash is the same
Yeah.
every year. It never changes.
It's just the number of parcels that have been assessed. That's really what drives the number, right?
How do we lose parcels?
We didn't.
And,
That's why it doesn't make sense.
and us, yeah.
That's why I didn't understand it.
Maybe a high level number of properties under construction, and therefore they weren't receiving services. They're, you know, I don't know.
But that also, I mean, in my mind, that's probably, because I'm sure we paid trash the whole time we were building the house.
They do.
It would never have crossed my mind to go find the trash thing and go.
Yeah.
They
dig it
actually
out.
pay more.
I'm just
because they have
speculating
bins.
as to what happened, maybe that they said, well, let's not.
It is
you
what
know.
it is.
Yeah,
Okay.
So the good part is, and I know this has been painful to get to here, the information is greatly improving.
right.
And that's a huge help to actually have accurate numbers and accurate things in the right buckets.
Right.
Because before, everything was just so mushed together, it was kind of hard to figure out what was going on.
But we can't make cuts unless we actually see the lines.
100%. Well, I think,
So I want to see line items so we can make cuts.
but I think what you're looking at here is if we're really at the
But we're-
350, the trash is going to go away.
But we're not.
Wait, I know, but I don't know what it's at.
Right.
So,
So we're going to present, I know, to the council tonight, ending December.
Yeah, the mid-year report.
I did see you explain that it's not an accurate number, the way funds come in. The expenditures, as you explained, are accurate, the outgoing expenses.
Reasonably, yeah.
Yeah, the revenue is not. But I do know that the number of homes sold has dropped dramatically, so.
yeah, this year's property tax bill payments will probably be pretty equal next year. It'll go
Right.
up a little teeny
There's
bit.
not going to be a bunch of transfer
There won't be a
fees.
ton, all that transfer money will be gone.
You'll see that in the report this, you know, little later today.
You know, there's only
Yeah.
14 or 15 homes.
Yeah, yep.
So, the property transfers will be down, but the property taxes will still be very, very favorable. They'll still go up.
But they won't, they'll go up a little based upon the fact it creeps up and they'll sell a
Right.
couple. But in general, that number where we got a big bump through the middle is gonna go away.
With that big sale, that was
Yeah.
a year ago, but it'll still go up some.
Oh, yeah.
All right, So we're looking at that, and,
I mean, we wanted to sort of, in addition to kind of just outline what the structural fixes are, just kind of looking at the major categories. So, you know, about $1 million is for salaries and benefits between two departments.
What?
About $1 million or $1.1 million is just for salaries and benefits for planning and city administration. Public safety is $245. The contract services that are provided by LA County and Wildan are really, you know, you got to have that if you're going to generate that revenue. That's sort of fixed. Finance contract, that's sort of, you know, in my opinion, a necessary service. Area landscape, not a lot of money. So my point is, there's not a lot of sort of ways to just trim it, or, you know,
we
you,
need to see the line
yeah. well,
items, and we'll
yeah.
look at it.
But Jim, I think part of this is, there's a couple pieces here that drive all the dollars, which is how much work, how much are we getting accomplished,
Right.
right? So you either spread it out, slow it down, whatever these things are, because the hiring the extra consultant to do this and the extra consultant to do
Right.
that, you target something, we get it completed, and we spread out the items out over 3 years instead of over 2 years, or whatever that is, to make it all go. Because even right now, we're spending money on the siren and the sewer and the
Right.
whatever, and all these things get lumped in, whether we put them under a one-time cost or not. There's a lot of extra stuff that keeps
Right.
getting bundled in. And then it really depends on how much we want to go all the way down. I think the trash thing's gonna have to be on the table for what it looks like, because that's gonna get you halfway there.
It's gonna get you all the way when the numbers actually pay.
No, I get it. Well, in my mind, it's gonna get us halfway there for where we are right now, and just resets it, and then going forward, we
Real
don't.
numbers, pretend numbers,
Yeah.
it would cover it, but I think that, I'm not sure that it won't cover it with their other stuff too. But yeah, I understand. But like I said before, we can't do a budget if we don't have line items and actual numbers. So this is kind of an overview, but now we got 35 minutes, you know, so we could have been working on a real budget.
Well, I think that was the point of the conversation, is you give us some areas that, well, first of all, in the slide that talks about the proposed cuts, maybe you want to comment on that. Does that look good? Because,
Well, most of them aren't even real cuts. They're adjusting to what's really
okay,
happening.
so maybe let's just call it adjustments then. The adjustments that we use to go and build the new budget that we're going to take to you for commentary. And at that time, you'll have details, for sure, right? You'll find out where the 5% is cut at whatever item. But I think the purpose of tonight's meeting is to get some feedback from you. Are you looking at the adjustments? Does that look good to you?
I think
If-
we can find more.
Understood, but maybe you want to give us some pointers to where to find more. I know
I haven't
Councilmember,
seen the numbers, so I can't tell you. If I have a list in front of me with all the numbers for what goes to what, then I can look at it. Just an overview, what am I supposed to say? Oh, cut administration more. I can't say that without seeing it, you know.
What?
Cut landscaping more. I can't see that. We're gonna, now, we still haven't built the fence, which we're gonna have to build a fence, and we're gonna fix some landscaping, which we have to fix some landscaping. We got a broken pipe, but, you know, how much extra do we need to do? Do we need to have a drone flying over to take pictures? Well, and do they need a video? No. You know, we're getting a baseline, but no. I mean, there's a couple $1,000 that we really don't need. We were gonna have a fire field committee, now we're not. So, no, we don't need that. And if we have line items like that, you know, that would be helpful.
well, when we go into the budget, we're not going to lay out that you're going to do the drones, you know, you're going to do X, you're going to do Y. I think those are decision points that you're going to have to make. But how we're going to build a budget is we're going to put $1 to it to say, hey, this is minimally what we need to maintain the City Hall campus
Right.
without fencing. That's your decision. But we'll have to do that to put some numbers together.
I've been doing it since 2000.
You're right, Council. I'm not,
I've been doing it since 2004. I understand, I do it at home, I do it at work, I do it at the hospital. I understand how to do a budget. And generalities are wonderful, but they're not, you know, it's not like a specific, that I can look at a line and say, yeah, we need that, yeah, we don't. Like last time, we needed to finish our video or putting our stuff into online files, and that was 30,000. Well, we needed to do that. but now we don't, because it's done. And things like that.
Well, I don't want the half an hour to go to waste, so I was just trying to characterize some conversation piece we can have for sure, you know?
Well, and I think part of it is the numbers are getting more accurate, so we're gonna be in better, it's gonna get closer to reality as we get down there. I agree.
The mid-year is not even close.
Hold on, I'm okay with that as a statement. I'm just saying is, as we get better line items and we segment things better, it's going to be closer to accurate, it's gonna improve itself. In the past, it was always so loosey-goosey kind of feel to it, that when we get to the end, magically, by the time we're done, we're 200 grand off in our favor, isn't this great? So, to me, I'm not,
I'm glad that you'd explained it when we get to the council much better, because these mid-year things, and you got a deficit here, that's not a deficit, they just haven't sent you your check yet, you know, and the one, I guess you got the check in January for the motor vehicle, well, it looks like a big deficit, but it's not, and all these things look like deficits, and they're not, but you explained it, and I'm glad that someone, I don't know if you mentioned, it was in the thing that we did get a motor vehicle one, but it came in January, not December, so people see this big supposed deficit is not. And so I actually think the budget looks like it's gonna be pretty good, quite honestly, for this 22, 23.
Yeah, and you have to always remember that, and what I'm going to try to do like in the future is, you know, right now we're comparing sort of half the budget to the results through December 31st, but that's not a good comparison because revenues are not always straight lines, some are seasonal. So what I'd like to be able to do is develop a sort of a seasonally adjusted budget through December 31st. What do you typically get through December 31st, and make that your sort of your comparison to the actuals? Then that variance number becomes more meaningful. But I would agree with you that when I started looking preliminarily, where do I think we're going to end the year? We are likely going to end the year a little, not much, but a little bit over budget on the revenue side, and of course under budget because of vacancies primarily on the expenditure side. So that's good. But not material. But we're not going to see, you know, world-shaking sort of variances there at the end of the year. But that's one of the limitations with the mid-year analysis, that when you're just using 50% of the budget for comparison. I'm going to try to improve on that in the future. And that's why I added those explanations as to why, you know, we got the money in January, so yes.
And I think we decided we didn't want to waste your time with monthly things. I mean,
Right.
there was one council member, didn't we decide that? We're not going to
Yeah,
do that.
quarterly,
It's a
yes.
complete waste of your time.
Yeah.
Even quarterly is kind of, are you going to do it quarterly? That's kind of a waste too, quite honestly.
Yeah.
But that's all right. It's less time.
And the other thing I wanted just to point out again, is since we have time, is if the way I would look at this is, here are the proposed cuts, and you can see where the big dollars are. So, you know, and you're going to want to see some of those details, it sounds like, which is fine, but the big dollars are really not going to be in this sort of list here, where we're finding some adjustments. Again, the operating budget for the administration's office includes things like council administrative, or city council expenses, publications, things that are sort of almost, if you're going to have this level of service, you got to do that level of work and have those costs. The big dollars really are here. And that's where we thought we would at least get some direction from the council or the committee, was to, okay, when you really look at it, we're talking about staffing, public safety, and refuse as your major expenditures, and of course, emergency preparedness, which we're really proposing cuts. Those are your big dollars. You're not going to find, you can look at the line items, but you're going to see a few dollars here, a few dollars there. If you're looking to cut, to come up with $350,000, I don't know how you avoid, you know, not looking at these bigger categories of expenditures.
well, and honestly, how we would handle it right now, if this is my company, one, we would not hire to replace Vanessa. We would just drag this thing out as long as what it could be. And if that is we can't get this done in that time, we would start prioritizing what had to get done, which is, in my mind, usually service to the consumer, and then we would stretch everything else as far as we could. We would, the reality is next year's budget will be easier because the dollars we're gonna get by the end of this year will be very similar. It'll be much more predictable for next year. We'll lose.
When you say next year, you're saying 23, 24?
Yeah,
or
23, 24.
Okay.
Because that number will be easier, because that number will be, the property tax increases will go up a little bit. we'll lose most of our transfer because there's a way, or lose half of it or something like that. We'll have a better feeling, John will have an idea on how we're doing on building and what's going on there. But I think the issue here is finding that extra chunk of money is totally doable, because every place wastes 5%, 10%, no matter what you do, no matter what it looks like. When we're making money, we waste tons of money at the office. Then when we start not doing so well, all of a sudden, all this little stuff goes away, and we really kind of screw ourselves down tight of what it looks like. I think the big thing here is, as a resident, not as a city council member, I'd be happier to pay my extra $120 or whatever that is worth of trash than to have a structural deficit, which I've never done in my entire life anywhere. I don't like it. No one, I know, but what I'm saying is, that's an easy thing. And then, in general, if you ask people how they thought it was going, they feel, in general, that we're doing a much better job. Like, things are happening and things are whatever, very proactive. So to say is, hey, we're getting a lot of stuff done and we have a lot of moving parts going right now, to me, I'd rather have the trash just reset. We do it, and then we don't raise it, we eat it going forward again until we need to figure it out. And then we don't replace Vanessa, because I would have started this meeting with, well, who's gone? That's how we normally would have started it. It's just weird that we're on microphones while we do it. And look at how to do that. Well, that decision has already been made. So it's super simple. And then is, how do we do it in a way that we don't look at what the performance / service level is, and we keep it high. Then you gotta go through, this is where you gotta go through everything is. My guess is, not because of you, but because of other reasons, we spend a lot more money on lawyers than we used to.
Yep.
Tons more, because one person has a million questions and that's where it gets directed, right? So we're being fair to you, so you could do that. So the other option is, you say, okay, you can't talk to Pat anymore, you now have to talk to Elaine, and now Elaine can't do what she was doing to get things done. She now has to do that job where we've been able to outsource that out, just like Alan, right? Who does the home thing, the housing development part? Is it
Barry.
Alan? Barry did a spectacular job. The best money we've spent is Barry getting that stuff to happen, but Barry's gone right now. We don't have to worry about that. So we got to look at what else is there like that we can stretch out and not get ourselves in trouble. We got to stretch, just let it happen, and then once we catch back up, we'll figure out where it goes. But we've gotten so much accomplished.
John, you and Krishna are sitting here. Is there any things you can think of as far as we don't need to spend money on?
Well, I can just say from my department, I'm constantly looking for ways
Right.
to trim, so that just goes into the everyday process for
And have you
department.
identified anything?
Well, I think, we'll be looking at potentially some purchases of equipment that can help us streamline things and maybe cut costs, especially with newsletter and agenda. I would like, if you guys were willing, I'd like to make the investment in iPads and switch you off from paper agendas to digital agendas. But I know that's not something you may want to do, but there would be a huge cost savings there over time. So yes, I'm constantly trying to evaluate where can we create those efficiencies just from an operational level. And then of course, we just, as a team, we present that.
Right, I'm sure you do. John?
We had some cost savings already, just because we haven't had some staff. We lost our administrative clerk a couple months ago, so that position's been unfilled. Our admin clerk, that position has been unfilled until, we're looking to bring somebody on board. And also code enforcement, but we have somebody new now covering that. So, other than that, I know there's some costs I think that we can, like Christian mentioned, that we can, invest in to help our jobs easier in terms of, bringing in some, software programs to help us review plans and get that done more efficiently.
Well, and the reality is,
What software programs do you need to read over the plans?
Right now, you know, because we do everything electronically. We're trying to get our application on electronically. It's up there now. It's just when you're reviewing plans, it's a little bit clumsy because you got one screen on there and you're trying to make annotations and, you know, trying to stamp out the plans electronically. What we're using right now is a little bit, you know, clumsy. And, you know, there's a program out there right now called Bluebeam, and it seems to be like the industry standard, and that's what they use to, you know, review plans, measure, you know, plans electronically and be
So
able
does
to
your
digitally stamp it.
calculations for you?
I guess it could, in terms of like, if you're looking to measure, you know, the area.
Right, and your pad and your covered and your graded and all that, is that what it does? Versus looking at it and looking at the calculations the applicants made and you confirming those, is that what? It does it itself, just based upon the plan of the lot?
I'm not a specialist on it, and actually, you know, I've heard people use it, I've heard, you know, people talk about it.
All right.
I'm not an expert on it.
But typically, software, better, faster computers and better, faster software is cheaper than more people.
I didn't see any people.
No, I'm just, as in, if from a service level, we can get people
I'm
better.
just wondering, you know, for all the years that people looked at the plans and did that, and what is the advantage of this, and what is plans going electronically, other than it's in the computer versus the paper ones that we used to get, which are big and easy to see. But I was just asking.
The issue with electronic is, I mean, I'm in a business that
Right.
we do this all day long, and us being remote and everyone on their computers, the errors are up.
Well, I don't want us to be.
No, I get it.
That's
Um,
exactly what we don't want.
Is the paper is always 1,000 times better for
Right.
people to look at it. Until you go the whole extreme where you project the room on the floor and you can now walk through it and, you know, that kind of
Yeah,
stuff,
yeah, yeah.
which is a whole new,
Right.
Right
No,
stuff.
I've seen that, the virtual walkthroughs and.
but, I mean,
Okay. Well, this is actually honestly a pretty easy and general start. I think we can do more specific, as you heard me, and better. But, so this is the first step for our 23-24 budget. We've approved everything here. We don't have to, the trash thing, we could do half of it. You don't have to do all of it. You could say half of it.
the pain is the same pain of telling everybody and the same people complaining. My viewpoint is if we're gonna do the trash, just do the trash right here and then just leave it alone next year. And it is, if you're
We'll
gonna do,
vote. We'll
okay,
vote.
I'm fine voting,
Well,
because,
of course we are, and we'll vote, we always
Yeah.
vote, and that's how it'll work out. But I would just say do half, because I don't think that it's gonna be as dire, because it never is. But we aren't gonna have the 200,000 from the federal government, 220, so
no.
we have to find 220.
Well, whatever direction you give us is a starting point. It's definitely not written in stone, you know? So if you want us to start with half, we can put that number together when we actually get the budget process started.
Well, how much does it come to per home? Like, I don't actually exact know. How much is it gonna be per homeowner? What is their check gonna go up? What are their bill gonna go up?
Each parcel pays $1,100 per year.
Right.
now. Without rate increases. Next year, I believe, and it depends on the trash rate, if you recall, and the ceiling is 5%, the floor is 3%. So the increase could be between 3 and 5%.
So,
And let's just take 4, just to be the middle of the road. I think that their annual rate would go up to $1,650. Now, don't quote me on that.
well, we need real numbers.
Yeah, we'll have real numbers, but I think in the,
Is it that high?
I think in the ballpark,
Okay.
let's just use that,
So
for
currently
example.
it's 1,100 per home,
That's right,
and you think it's gonna go up to approximately 1,600, maybe 1,500.
right.
And if we don't pick it up, and if we don't pick it up, what does it come to per homeowner extra? Because that means they're already gonna get a $500 bump.
It would be about $42 a month if it was a $500 differential.
With,
$500 a year.
Okay, so that is if the city does not pick it up, it'll go from 1,100 to 1,600.
Right.
Based on that estimate.
So
Which
look
is
at a $500 a year bump. That's a pretty significant bump.
I know, but times 660 houses-ish that's not it.
So,
700
Is-
parcels.
It's basically $360,000 more tax or more whatever.
Yeah. So, but it's, they don't care about the group, they care about them personally. They see their trash went up from 1,100 to 1,600. That's a pretty big bump for 1 year. And they're gonna look at it as a 1 year increase. So if we drop it to, $250 a year, it's a little more palatable per household.
You don't think the same amount of people are gonna complain no matter what the number is?
Yeah, I don't. Because a lot of people don't mind a little bit of a bump, but they don't like a big bump. Like, for instance, if I get $250 a year, I probably wouldn't care. If I got a $500 a year on 1,000, so that's a 50% almost increase.
Do you look in the
Yeah,
first
I'd be
place?
pissed.
Do you look in the first place?
Karen will absolutely,
Okay, someone will notice? Okay.
absolutely will notice.
And I'm sorry, I shouldn't have
Yeah.
been speaking while you were speaking, but, if we assume on the high end our gap is $250,000, and you take 250,000 divided by 600 homes, right? That works out to be about $34 per month versus 42. We're looking to close the gap. We're not looking to make a profit, right? We're looking to not generate 360,000. We don't need
So
360,000.
32 times 12 is $408, is what you're saying? Well, we need the exact number.
Well,
but
we-
that's
we can
close.
get
So
you-
somewhere between
Yes.
408 and $500.
By March 1st, Republic Services usually give us the new rate based on the contractual obligation. So we'll have that for you, for sure.
If you're, and they're gonna, instead of saying 1,100, oh, it's 1,000, and then they see 1,600, 1,500, oh,
That's
that's a
too
50% increase, that's a huge jump. What the heck's going on? If it's a $250 jump, it won't be so, it won't be a 50% in their minds jump. Cause no one will say 1,100, they'll say 1,000.
No, I get it, it's just, but, so, the amount of people, like, and I don't mean, like at our house, no one would look.
You're not the same as the rest of the world. Joe.
I understand, but,
No, you're not. And there's a lot of old folks here who really watch their stuff. And even us, like, for instance, I don't wanna pay bills, I do want, Karen who does, I will absolutely hear about it.
but either, let's go look at it a different way, is, we know we're gonna have a deficit of something. Well, cause there's other things that are gonna make it worse too, is when the CalPERS thing comes rolling back around, that number's gonna get worse, isn't it?
I don't know. I mean, and they spread that out over many years, so the immediate impact of anything like that is not going to be substantial. In fact, we saw that liability go down and, so because of the last couple of years.
Okay, but,
They aren't gonna make us pay it in 1 year.
Yeah,
no, I appreciate that, but then when we pay that 300,000 or whatever we've been paying slowly into our thing, is that part of the structural? Is that part of, that's not one time, that's part of structural, right?
We did 3 times on it. Didn't we do 3 times payments, so we don't
I
have
know,
to
but
do
that
it?
money shows up out of this budget, not out of the one-time budget.
restate your question. Maybe I didn't understand what you were asking, sorry.
When we are behind on our CalPERS and our whatever, blah, blah, blahs, all those things, and now we are making up money by putting extra money to catch back up, we put it into our trust fund and et cetera, is that money that we're putting in and that we owe part of one time, or is that part of ongoing structural problem?
It's one time. Sort of like you have this obligation, and how much money do you have set aside for that?
So
But
even though,
that's done anyway. Our last payment was in the
I understand, but
22,
when it happens,
23 budget.
I understand,
And I
but
think it came out of general funds, didn't it?
It
Came out
did.
of general funds, that's not a one.
what I'm
that
trying to
was a
say is,
general
where does
fund.
it appear in the budget?
It's gone. You won't see
When
it
it
at all in
happens again-
23, 24. It's, believe me, the other cities in the state which are gonna be broke, cause they're not gonna wanna start paying it in 23, 24. You're not gonna have to worry about that till 26, 27, 27, 28.
Well, and then Robert can speak to this, but I think what Councilman Piper is referring to is the unfunded liability that we put money
We
away
did.
into a trust fund. But every year in our budget, we still have to pay the ongoing.
No, I'm
Right,
and-
so-
And all the ongoing we pay is structural, part of the
Yes.
structural problem. And any money we put aside that catches us back up, and we put in our trust, that is for,
The unfunded, like, one-time.
which is still, it's all shows up as one time?
No, it never
Yes.
did. It showed up in our general fund
So keep in mind,
expenditures.
the money we have in this, we'll call this trust fund
Yep.
for pensions, it's in the $500,000 range, right?
Right.
We funded that one time. We're not making any annual contributions to that anymore, right? So that's just,
From an accounting software standpoint, does it show up as part of my ongoing, do we divide that up over the 5 years we should have been paying about, or they just say we owe $500,000, we take it out of our reserves and we stick it in there?
if we choose to,
Come out of reserves. We had surpluses for multiple years, so we spent some of our surplus on that.
Okay, but reserves, surplus, all the same thing in my mind. This is all money that we
Well,
have
okay,
over
so
here.
tell us how you want, so you could
I
call them
just wanna- I
surplus
just
the
wanna-
same as reserves.
I just wanna
That's
make
fine,
sure we have extra money. Once we run the business, we spend X amount of dollars running the business.
Right,
And the goal is to make that number break even,
right.
right? If there's extra money because something happened and we didn't spend it, which is how a lot of this has happened in the past, so we just didn't spend it. I think part of what's happening now is we're doing so many things that that's how we're spending the money.
I didn't actually
So-
done anything.
We talk about doing a lot of things, though.
so let me, maybe this will help, hopefully, this in terms of your, I understand what you're trying to say here. So every year, we are paying CalPERS for that debt we have that's called an unfunded liability. And this year, we paid $65,000, right? And every year, we're going to have to pay approximately that until that debt has been resolved. We also are sitting on $500,000 of money that is set aside for that specific purpose that we're not tapping into, that theoretically, you could save for that payment that we're making every year, rather than coming out of our revenues or reserves. We could just draw down $65,000 a year from that trust to pay that unfunded liability check. That would sort of help, the ongoing budget, if you will, because that's considered an ongoing expense.
Okay, that's what I was trying to say.
Yeah.
So, right now, we've put the money aside, we have not given it to them.
We're not
We're
using it.
only required to give them 65, 70, whatever it is, $1,000. We could pull it out of that trust versus, which would then not come out of our ongoing, even though we still would owe it at another time. It's a way to kick the ball down the road if,
It's a way to fund that's the whole point of that trust, is to, the reason these were set up is because the expectation from PERS and all the projections years ago was that in the mid-20s, like 25, 26, is when you expect those rates to peak, to pay for all the sins of prior years. That's when the things are supposed to peak, and then they're supposed to go down with PEPRA, new legislation. And so these monies are being accumulated to use it in those peak periods to reduce the impact of those rate increases. But you can do that today, and I don't see your numbers going up that dramatically. It wouldn't be a bad idea to take $65,000 a year out of your trust. You have $500,000 there, and start paying some of that $65,000 bill, rather than taking it out of your revenues. That takes away from other things you can be spending it on. Just a suggestion.
well, and then how are we, sorry, so we have $500,000 there. How was that money, what kind of return are we getting on that? Are we at least getting like 4 1/4 or something?
Remember we saw last time that, because that money is invested more aggressively because we can under state law. We had a loss last year. Remember, we talked about that, the real loss of $60,000, where we would never lose money on our regular investments. So that's and we had a conversation 6 months ago about how aggressive do we really want to be with that sort of, that strategy, those funds. And we're kind of on the aggressive end, and the council decided, let's just keep it that way. But that's the price you pay. But we're still got a fair amount of money, and we're seeing good returns this year on that.
What type of return do we get and how?
Last year we lost $50,000, so we saw no return. We had a negative return of,
On the money that
10%.
the money that's sitting there, do we put them in money markets, we put them in CDs, put them in T-bills, what are we putting them in?
invested in a lot of things, equities and things that are very aggressive.
Not the risky money, the regular money, the $500,000 we have.
CDs.
CDs? What kind of return do we get on a CD right now?
2%, 3%. It's actually gone up. We're getting some 4% money, but on average, we're in the 3% range. Better than 6 months ago or a year ago.
And that loss of last year, quite a bit of it's probably come back already. We got the S&P 500's at 4,000.
Yeah, and plus, you're right.
100 already.
In the previous 3 years, you saw substantial returns of the 15, 20% range, so
We had several good
it all
years
washes,
and then a bad year, and this, we'll see, it'll probably be.
So when do we have to because the big thing we have to decide at some point is, because we have to notify people, is the trash, right? When's the date, the last date that we have to vote on that?
Good question. So we looked at the dates, so we have to notice the ratepayers 45 days in advance of when we would have a hearing. So we talked about having a hearing in early June, right? If you count back 45 days as to when you need to send them a notification that we have proposed rate increases, that actually works out to be somewhere around, I think works out to be like mid-April.
Okay.
So I think previous calendars had that earlier, but I think realistically, I think we're looking closer to April when we need to send those notices out.
And by mid-April, the number we have will be way better than the number we have right now.
Absolutely.
And then we just divide it by.
But also, I'd like to, before then, have a line item, so we can go through every department, every line, and work on.
So can we all get,
We need to do that.
just by GL code all the way down? Do your GL codes have descripts next to them?
Yeah, they have descriptions, but they won't necessarily tell you what is being charged to those, but we have, as we talked about, we're doing a much better job of making sure we're coding things to the right place and that we have a really good understanding of what is being charged of these accounts so we understand them and know how to budget for them in the future. So we've spent a lot of time with that. So we can provide you some information that says, here are the accounts, here are the descriptions, but here are the kinds of things that are going in there, at least in terms of order of magnitude. So you have a better understanding of what's being charged, what's discretionary, what's not, you know?
Well, I just want to review the budget calendar with you that the council approved. So I think late March is when the notices of rate increase that have to go out to the property owners in order to conduct a public hearing. And then April 24th is when there is going to be a budget audit committee with you guys to look at the proposed budget and review the fund expenditures by department. I think those are the line items that you were referring to.
So we should be doing that before we send out notices.
Well, and so I think there's some wiggle room that Robert talked about from our last go-around.
Okay, until I
So
send
we'll put some dates together that needs to be definitive for you, because the notices have to be
it. Yeah, because I
out.
thought that's what we're gonna do today,
Right.
until I got this, which is really not that helpful. And so, and now we're gonna send out notices to everybody that their taxes are going up, and we really don't know how much they have to go up until we've actually looked at it.
Well, we don't,
March 1st. We'll know from Republic Services what the new rates will be July
We won't
1st.
know what our budget requirements are. We won't be able to see what we can cut, what we can't cut. We won't be able to say, look, we're just not hiring this person, or we are hiring this person, we need this person, so we are gonna hire them. So, I mean, I don't like generality meetings, honestly, but here we are. Now that means we're gonna essentially, we've been trapped we're gonna have to send out to those people that their trash rates are going up.
so that's into March.
It's now mid-February and we're not having another meeting.
Do we have to,
We're not having another meeting.
You will have another meeting on February 27th.
March 6th?
Sorry, March 6th. March 6th.
6th, we have a meeting,
Yeah, March 6th.
so we do have one more.
Yes.
As long as we have, because you hadn't said that, I apologize. You had said March and then April.
It's
So,
on the agenda for tonight.
I don't look at how far down the road with meetings. So meeting March 6th with the budget, is that one to the city council?
No, that's with a
just us.
committee.
All right, and so then we don't have till the end of March, we don't have to send out notices. Okay, so we'll think about sending out notices, we'll think about how much we have to raise it.
Yep.
If we have to, and then all of it, part of it, whatever. And then we're gonna look at the different departments and see where we can save a little money, because honestly, most of this is just really just reflecting what's accurate, except for the 5% across the board and the 5% across the board in the area 1 and 2, which is a good thing if they'll pick it up, but it needs to get done, so if they don't, we're gonna have to pay for it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Does that sound done?
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Thanks.
you want a line item all the way down budget?
I want it the way we always had it, where we could look at this, and
Page
this
after
money
page.
goes to
Yeah.
here, and we have pages and pages, and, no, do I need to see how much you're spending on pencils and pens and paper? I mean, we had general administration costs, which includes papers and pens and and paper clips. If you want to give it one at a time, or if you just say 5%, that's easier. But certain things like, you know, employees, are people here working? Are we hiring temporaries to make up for people who are gone? Are we not hiring somebody because we need to hire somebody? I mean, we might need to hire somebody. And, you know, we're gonna have money saved and different things.
Which is back to the same thing. I think people who live here would be happier to pay a little more and have quality service than
Depends
not.
on what
But
their
we don't know what that
personal
means.
budget is.
I hear you.
And by the way, the media report, if you had a chance to look at that, the media report that's going to council this evening,
Yeah, I
that's the
did.
12th. So one of the attachments shows the line items by department in the general fund, so that's the pretty high level of detail.
In today's thing?
Yeah, for the media report, one of the attachments, but that's the kind of what we'll be presenting to you and providing to you with maybe a little more sort of descriptions of what it entails, those accounts entail.
And can we, and when we do this on the 6th, can you log in, so that way if we say on this GL code, here's our basic descriptions of it, we think this and that, and you can click in and see what's really in there? Sure. I mean, that might be the way, is talk about it in generalities down to the GL code and then enter into the GL code and see what's really going on.
What I've been doing on my own spreadsheets, the same ones, the same level of detail, just to the notes, I put what's in there, what are the components, that I can also include in that report to you that you get on the 6th.
All right, we gotta do
Okay,
the next
this one
thing.
here. No, I don't.
Well, no, it's 7 o'clock, next meeting.
Councilmember Black, it's item 13A.
I'm looking at it, you know, because it did, but it had the salaries and all that. Right.
Yeah, there should be an attachment there with the details by line item.
Okay, I got it now. And it does have office supplies.
So we got some direction from the committee. I think we'll piece together what we can.
Okay.
So on the 6th, you know, in addition to talking about policies and schedules of fees, and, you know, we'll come back with sort of another round of data, and then we'll go from there. Does that sound good?
Yep,
Perfect.
thank you.
Okay, and, but before we adjourn the finance committee, I just want to make sure that you are available on March 6th at 6 PM,
That's
right?
not a city council meeting, that's just a Monday.
March 6th, I think I am.
I'm good for the 6th.
And Robert, with 6 PM start time, we okay?
Oh. I honestly don't, I think I am, but I don't know. I know I'm gonna be gone one week in there, but I don't know when it is. And I might be back on the Monday, so.
Well, and if
I'll
necessary,
have to, one weekend in there, I know I'm not, I don't know if it's the 5th or the 12th or the 19th, but there's a week in there I'm gone. And,
so Jim, if you could, if it's not the 6th, could you throw out 3 or 4 other times that work for you? It could be a Tuesday, it could be a Wednesday, it could be a whatever, and then
the
we'll see.
13th, I mean, whatever
I
weekend
can't
it's
do the
not.
13th.
And the 20th is too close to our thing. I just, I can maybe call the house and ask.
Well, all right, we don't have to figure it out this very moment,
Okay.
but we need to solve it soon.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
So we'll tentatively schedule it for March 6th, Monday at 6 PM. And Councilmember Black, if you could,
I kinda think I am here.
okay,
I'm not, see this.
that's good news.
Is 6 work for you, or do you want to do it earlier, since